Hello. Welcome to the stream. Oh, another day, another stream in fascist America. Welcome to whatever this is, an attempt at providing education, advocacy, and a little common sense in this digital wasteland. I'm Aubri Devashrayee. Today, I wanted to briefly touch on a couple of national events. I'll probably just be talking about these things. And then go over more local news. This will be very quick. Then we'll get into banned book club. And then continue our talk about Marxism, but have that lead into the Communist Manifesto that we have been reading for literature story time. Someone in my YouTube comments was like, this is interesting and niche bedtime story recommendation. Love. Amazing. Glad to see that reach getting out there. But it is so interesting how the algorithm decides to serve certain things. Like, we don't have control over this. Also, I have been having a difficult time in categorizing the literature storytime videos for this particular book. Normally for literature storytime, I guess not book, but manifesto, this piece of literature, because normally I categorize these videos as being entertainment, sometimes education, but mostly entertainment. But this can fall into entertainment, education, news and politics, activism. Like, there are many different categories it can fall under. So I've tried categorizing some of the videos in some of these different categories, and I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing for me to be trying it out in these various categories. It's probably getting to be served all over the place, but who knows? Who knows what the answer is? But anyway, I thought that was funny. We'll see what I decide on, or if there's any sort of argument that people would like to make for it being in one category or another. Do let me know, because you can't just select multiple categories either when you are posting to YouTube. But anyway, we are on section 3, Socialist and Communist Literature, and this first section is Reactionary Socialism. This is very pertinent to current events, especially politics, the reactionary aspect of things, how there are many people who are wanting to engage with this type of thought, philosophy, and organizing, but how it can come from a reactionary place. I will admit that I have been reactionary at various parts in my life, but also understanding that one of the hard parts with dealing with more reactionary people is that they tend to be reactionary to any sort of criticism as well. So there is that. Largely where we see this difference between liberals, who are technically on the right, in my opinion, not on the left, and leftists. So that's just a thought. Hello, Night Nalav. Good to see you. Welcome. Reactionary streamer. Yes, on occasion. I try to be a little more based in theory, practice, praxis, if you will, which is applying both of these things. But yeah. How are you doing? How are your studies going? Are you on a break right now? Hope things are going well. But that is what we will be going over today. Hi, Deanie. Come here. Yeah, there you go. She keeps looking like she's gonna jump up. Come here. You got it. There you go. Hi, bug. I don't know if you can hear her purring in the mic. It's very cute. I'm going exam. The only word I can know out of my studies. Okay, so you're currently in your exams. I hope those are going well. Juniper seemed very intrigued as soon as you brought that up. She was like, oh, okay, hi, hello. Okay, so per usual, we will be watching a humorous video, and we're continuing this satirical podcast by The Onion. This is the second season of A Very Fatal Murder. Oh, so serious. And this is the third episode, The People versus Milo Reed. So, let's give this a watch. For most of it, it is going well. It's about as good as you can hope for, I guess. I hope you're able to take care of yourself throughout the process. Okay. Let's see what this has in store for us. I'm also going to watch it again at a higher speed, just to get to things that I've planned today. Oh, whoops.
Over the past few weeks, I've been looking for something. Something important. Day in and day out, I've been braving the California elements, looking down dark alleyways, pursuing juicy leads, and dissecting grisly remains. And so far, it's all led me to one place.
That's so good. Why is that so good?
The best taco in LA.
Oh, this is great. Yeah, what's in there? Pineapple? That's really good. Can you give me another one of those?
And sure, I knew exactly how far I'd go for a great al pastor. But how far would I be willing to go to talk to Milo Reed?
Milo Reed, entrepreneur by day, wife strangler by night.
The man had many hobbies: strangling,
You found a
murdering,
song I
refurbishing
might
old
like?
cars, and spitting on his dead
Ooh.
wife.
So far,
Yeah,
you're probably well
do
acquainted
tell.
with Milo Reed. You know that he's a brilliant entrepreneur who fell into the worst fortune, murdering someone.
Please
But here's
share.
what you're not well acquainted with. His mind. What caused Milo to do it? What was he thinking? Yes, we know Milo Reed the murderer.
Big time murderer? Milo Reed.
Wife slayer and killer, Milo Reed. Strangler supreme, Milo Reed.
But who was Milo Reed the man who killed his wife?
The search for Liana Choi Reed's killer has come to an end.
Order! Order in the court!
Yeah, I saw him kill her. He live streamed it on Twitch.
He promised never to kill my daughter. He's a liar.
A man once called the next Einstein may be the next Einstein of killing his wife.
Very meta,
4
this
tacos and 1 double
episode.
horchata later, I was finally on my way to interview Milo Reed. From what I'd heard, Milo was currently confined to his 240,000 square foot mansion in Brentwood, known as the Iron Giant, under house arrest. Like most prisons, the compound was large, heavily guarded, and privately owned. But unlike most prisons, you could take a tour in your own vehicle and also point your fingers at all the cool stuff you see. Just as you cross the moat filled with the last of Los Angeles' potable water, you see Milo's prize, his experimental savanna.
He
where he
also
inbreeds
owned
exotic
it,
species
probably.
To quote-unquote play God. Even though, according to Milo, God doesn't exist.
Whoa, that gazelle has 3 ears. That's awesome.
Pass all of those, and you get to the man, the home prisoner of the hour, Milo Reed.
Hi, I'm here to see...
Welcome. Identification, please.
Oh, I don't actually have... Ah! Damn, my arm, that stung. What was that? Did you take my blood?
Welcome, David Pascal. State your business, guest. OPR podcaster, David Pascal.
I'm here to talk to Milo.
Jesus.
Confirmed. 1:30 p.m. meeting with guest OPR podcaster David Pascal. Credit score 578. David Pascal. Please proceed directly to front gate.
Just announcing
Cholesterol
people's
level
credit
4.8.
And
scores.
there he was,
SAT
5 foot
Taking
8
their
inches, dirty
blood.
blonde hair tightly cropped and combed against his playful boyish face. Milo Reed stood before me.
David, it's so nice to finally meet you in person.
I was a little woozy from his robot guard taking over a pint of my blood, but his image struck me nonetheless. I'll say it, he was kinda hot.
Yes, Milo, thank you. But wait, we've never spoken before.
Don't
pint
think so
of his
unexceptionally,
blood?
David.
That
Our
is so
spirits have
much
come
blood.
in several times. In fact, through my travels, I know most people on this plane of existence quite intimately. Also, I listen to your podcast. Oh, before I forget, would you like a tab or two of acid?
Milo immediately
Oh my. That is how these billionaire types are, though. The cadence in the way I said that was very strange, but that doesn't mean it's any less true. That these are very strange people who are constantly tripping on shit, but they like he's on house arrest, able to do drugs, okay? But especially with him saying like, oh, he was kind of hot. It's like when people have this attraction towards class, it also is hi. It also is easier to be what people consider conventionally attractive, which is really a lot of the time just based off of Eurocentric beauty standards, white supremacist beauty standards, but also class-based standards where you can buy beauty. It's Fils de Joie. Oh, Teeny. From Strome. Ooh, you have shared some of his stuff before. Strome Maestro and Verland. Okay. It has English dubs. Interesting. Would you mind if I saved this, because this sounds like something I will like? Would you mind if I saved this for Culture Corner for Friday? So it has its own designated spot. She is just all over the place today. Okay, cool. I'm gonna open it. Juniper. Not only is like the government trying to attack trans people's identification, Juniper's like taking this out of its placeholder that I have. Like, no. You must not leave the United States of America. Amazing. Thank you very much. But be careful because your stream might get muted while the song is played, as it is probably copyrighted. Okay, that's good to know. Thank you. Yeah, usually the technique that I have applied for music lately is oh, I like tripped for a sec. Is like pausing it kind of in between, because sometimes you can get around it if you don't have like as much of time that is interrupted, or you have more time that is interrupted so that it doesn't like catch it as much. So there's that workaround. Also kind of like playing it a little bit quieter and talking over it. I've found that has been a technique as well. But thank you for the warning. And thank you for sharing. I'm very excited to check it out.
immediately showed me to a bucket of complimentary mind-altering drugs he had placed near the entrance of his compound for guests to ingest as they please.
Oh, no thank you. I had a second cold brew this morning, so I'm already pretty wired.
Are you sure? I take a half tab and a rail every 2 hours to keep my mind open. Highly recommended.
Milo maintained his innocence throughout our entire conversation, and he even seemed chipper about his trial. One of the first things he did was bring me to a large field, where we threw C4 and Molotov cocktails at robotic-moving targets, which was actually a pretty cool billionaire thing of him to do.
So I guess my first question is, what's it like having the mind of a wife-murdering psychopath?
Co-opting the Molotov cocktail.
David, you know already that I didn't kill my wife. Look around you. I have so much to live for. Why would I
For
want
private
some dead lady
billionaire
getting in the way of that?
activities.
Damn it! Manuel, bring it in a little closer.
Some of the evidence,
Oh
though,
my
Milo, the
God.
people who saw you fleeing the scene, the spit on the corpse that matched your DNA sample, how do you explain that?
Evidence? David, you're so rudimentary. How could physical evidence pin me to a crime when a crime is, at its heart, emotional? Yes!
Every argument I had for why he may have killed Liana, he dodged. Every piece of evidence against him, he had a counter. Then, when he finally got bored of the C4, he'd load up his machine gun.
And the fact that you already had a mistress? Wouldn't you want to kill Liana so that you could be with your mistress?
On the contrary! In fact, I think Liana would have gotten along with Harmony really well if they'd had the chance to meet. Oh, Manuel, are you okay?
It was all fun and games until he hit a servant, Manuel. It ends up the moving targets weren't
Oh my
actually robotic. They were mounted to
God.
humans.
Oh God, where's his
A
hand?
Oh, don't worry,
servant.
David. We're not a new employee.
Not even just like not even like any number of other names you could say. He hit a servant. Jesus Christ.
I use Headhunter to find and recruit
Named
top qualified
Manuel.
candidates.
This is
Headhunter
not
makes it easy to sort applicants by job history,
literally
salary minimum,
racially
and general
targeted.
desperation for employment. Make long interviews and stacks of resumes a thing of the past with Headhunter.
Whoa, you're good at this.
It was easy to see why Milo had such a following. The guy was charming, and he had a knack for seamless integration. And as we picked Manuel up
A
and
tough
drove him to the servants'
cocktail.
quarters, the same place where
Is it
Liana
very
died, Milo
tasty?
said something else
To
that caught
some.
my attention.
And to
Besides
some,
strangulation,
very much
why would I have
not.
killed her in such a
But
pedestrian way.
such
I could
is
have pushed her into my large
such is
hadron
the
collider and
nature
shattered her into a
of
trillion
this
pieces.
I mean, that's true, and there would
brand
be
of
I could
cocktail.
have frozen her in my cryogenic tanks and
As it
shot her
should
into the
be.
sun.
Whoa, you really could have done that?
David, the most important thing you should know about me
Yeah.
is that there is so much that I'm capable of.
There is so much that I am capable of.
Oh,
Milo's
okay.
words stuck with me. But what did they mean? Hear that? Of course not, because it's Silence,
heard it
a
is
brand
pretty
new podcast
hot.
from OPR that
Yeah,
explores silence in its many
it's-
fascinating forms. From complete silence
Do you know
to
how
pretty quiet with some
spicy it
muffles in the
is?
background,
I would
each 4-hour
say
episode
that,
brings
like,
new meaning to the
it's
phrase dead air.
explosive
Join Noah each
levels
week for
of
new episodes
spicy.
wherever you get your podcasts. Now shut up and leave me alone already, because it's finally time for some
Flaming.
silence.
Even.
Things were starting to heat up in the trial, but just as quick as it began, the case had already been stonewalled.
Despite the defense's insistence the trial be held on Mars, Judge Nazarian ruled today the case will be tried right here in LA County. But the big question now
Trying to
is
get
there a
it to
single
be
juror
on
in Los
Mars.
Angeles who can objectively rule on the case of Milo Reed?
Please state for the court how you know Mr. Reed. Your Honor, Milo
That's
doxed me after he
fire.
bought my house in Detroit
Exactly.
to build a factory.
He used one of his recreational rocket launchers to blow up my car.
Your Honor, I
Just
cannot serve on
another
this jury
meaning
because
for
Milo
getting
Reed
lit.
killed my daughter, Liana.
Yeah, I know Milo Reed. He wired me $200,000 to say he was
You can tell I
innocent.
It
don't
wasn't
say that
looking good.
phrase,
The
and
only
that's as it
objective
should
people
be.
who the courts could find to serve on Milo's jury had been in vegetative states for the past 3 years. Needless to say, Milo was not pleased.
You are receiving a call from Milo Reed Home Penitentiary in Brentwood, California.
It's terrible here, David. My house arrest has me stuck in North America.
Just North America? So you can't even go to Bali?
Milo was clearly depressed, so I told him to keep calling to help get the weight off his chest.
You are receiving a call from Milo Reed Home Penitentiary
forgot
in
hot
Waikiki, Hawaii.
to say
Milo had his
lit
house arrest transferred to his private mansion off the coast of Hawaii for
or
the weekend.
light.
The way I see it, I'm just another victim
Yeah,
of
I
the
mean,
justice
all of those
system.
work,
Oh my God,
really.
Milo, what is that?
What? That's the ocean, David. I'm surfing right now.
Milo sounded awful. He vented for hours about life on his prison island. I wanted so much to tell him about my life, the tacos, the
I forgot
Hollywood Walk
how
of
to
Fame,
say
Disneyland.
lit or light.
But I
That's
didn't want to make him
okay.
jealous of my freedom. See, I didn't want to feel bad for someone who was possibly
You
a
already
wife
know that
anymore.
my French
The
is
more I talked with
horrible.
Milo, the more I believed it might not have been true. How could someone who loves
Your English
pineapples,
is
suckling pig
worlds
tacos,
better
and
than my
snorkeling off the
French.
coast of Hawaii as much as I do commit murder? We were basically the same, and I never murdered
So
my
he's
wife.
technically on
David, I
house
can tell
arrest.
something to you.
This shithead who did kill his wife. Like, it's saying that there's all of this evidence, but they're still having a hard time pinning it on him because of the corrupt system. And he's in Hawaii surfing. That is allowed. It really is not that satirical in many ways, and that's pretty tragic
Of course.
for
The
all
truth
of
is,
us.
I never wanted to kill Liana. All I wanted was to reveal truths about global warming, border security, and the colony collapse.
You care about the colony collapse?
Of course. And factory farming, the Me Too movement,
For-profit colleges?
a male-dominated entertainment industry,
The space race?
the Pacific Garbage Patch, and the,
The
2016 election.
Jinx!
When I came into
No.
this case, I originally wanted to expose the justice system for the sham that
They're
it
gonna
is,
become
for mistakenly letting
friends.
a guilty man walk free. But now, I see the justice system for what it really is. Still a sham, but in a totally new and chart-topping way. Because right now,
So just like how this podcaster became part of the problem very very legitimately by becoming the police chief in the previous season, now he is becoming friends with the killer.
this corrupt justice system stands to make a very different, if not worse, mistake. Putting away an innocent man. And that man is
We don't
Milo
say
Reed.
jinx, we say chips. What? Interesting.
Next time on A Very Fatal Murder.
Do you know
Welcome,
what
OPR
like those
podcaster
origins
David
are?
Pascal, eyesight, legally blind.
David, I don't
I know for like the word jinx, it's coming from like, uh-oh, it's like a type of like spell or like curse or hex that is being put on us. And that like you have to say that so that it doesn't continue. And you're not supposed to talk until the other says your name. Interesting. I think there is like a version of jinx, at least growing up. Like if you say something at the same time as someone, I remember there being something like that where you can't talk. But most of the time it would be like, jinx, you owe me this. And then most of the time people don't follow up. It is a middle school game, if not younger. Yeah, that sounds about like the same age.
I think it's safe to mix those drugs.
Just shut up and let me drive, Sydney.
Objection, Your Honor, that juror's in a coma.
Oh my God, Milo, I've never been paragliding before. This is awesome.
That juror is in a coma.
David Pascal, Onion Public Radio, and the San Andreas Fault Line. Now I want to take a minute to tell you about another tantalizing true crime podcast from OPR, The Murder Bitches with Whitney and Natalie. Join each week as they take a deep dive into some of their favorite cold case homicides. And just a side note, don't worry, I'm an ally and I would never call women bitches unless they said it first. This week, the Murder Bitches take a closer look at the disappearance of 8 children in 1981, all from the small town of Blood Creek, Arkansas.
Okay, so this is a murder that happened in the 80s in like North America or something.
Oh.
And there were these 8 kids who like lived in the same neighborhood, but one day they were all on their way home from school, but they never returned.
Oh my God, 8 kids? Someone in that town was a real murder slut.
Totally. Probably one of the parents.
Totally.
Hilarious and informative, it's
Oh
no
my
wonder
God.
their podcast has become such a huge phenomenon. If you haven't already
This
joined...
is like making fun of a lot of the other true crime podcasts of like, this person is like with this fake podcaster supposedly with like this outlet, but how there are all of these podcasts, you know, just of regular people creating stuff, kind of like following the pattern of My Favorite Murder, where there were, or there are, I think they still do this podcast. I used to listen to it more. Of 2 women talking about famous murders and stuff.
The bitch
They kind of
crew. What's wrong with you?
trailblazed
Are you like
that.
dead? Download and subscribe to the Murder Bitches today.
Hear that? That's the sound of our award-winning journalism. Subscribe to The Onion today and receive 12 monthly newspapers that smell even better than they sound. Go to membership.theonion.com
Wow.
to learn more.
I will be honest, I love the smell of stationery, of paper. I mean, not always. Sometimes that can be yikes. But a lot of the time, like if it smells like a bookstore, oh, love that. Okay, so I'm up in 6 hours. Yeah, do what you need to do. I know this is late for you. Thank you for being here. I have a 4-hour exam. Well, I hope you have a good rest. You were able to study, relax a little bit. Thank you for being here. Good luck with everything. At least 5-hour study session after it. Yeah, that's pretty brutal. But, I mean, good for you for studying. Needs to be done. Bare minimum, since I have a lot to do. Yeah, the balancing of having to have like school as a type of job, but especially if like you work another job, that is difficult. It is good seeing you. Thanks for stopping by. Okay, so I did want to play this quick video by Democracy Now! On the Cuba sanctions that have been happening. This person, Ada Ferrer, she is a historian, and I have been wanting to watch this video for a few days just to get her take on things. Bye! Thank you! Okay, I should probably refresh this. Okay, here we go. I'll also speed this up.
Democracy Now! I'm Amy Goodman with Nermeen Sheikh.
We turn now to Cuba, 5 months into the Trump administration's energy blockade.
I'm going to be honest. I've said this before. I have a crush on Darmin Sheikh.
Of the island, coming on top of the longest embargo in U.S. history. Expanded U.S. sanctions have exacerbated Cuba's economic crisis, forcing 10 million Cubans to live with rolling blackouts, inflation, and shortages of basic goods. This is 64-year-old Felicia de la Caridad Alvarez, a resident of Old Havana.
We've been without water for 6 months. Water is essential in a home. Without water, you're nothing. Life doesn't flow. That cistern is empty. Every 21 days, or a little longer, if I don't push the mayor or the director of Aguas de la Habana, they don't send the water truck. And what they do send is a small one. What we need here is a big one.
This year, President Trump repeatedly threatened to take over Cuba. But at a House Foreign Affairs Committee hearing Tuesday, Secretary of State Marco Rubio evaded a question about whether the Trump administration plans to invade the island. The question came from Illinois Democratic Congressmember Jonathan Jackson, the son of Reverend Jesse Jackson. Congressman Jackson recently returned from a visit to Cuba.
In closing, I would like to ask you, will you invade Cuba? I yield back.
Well, I have 1 second to answer. What do I do? I mean, you guys tell me your rules here. I tried to write down all the stuff
you invade Cuba?
Well, that's not the only thing you said.
Just last week, Rubio described Cuba as a failed state, threatening U.S. national security. He was speaking at a cabinet meeting.
Yeah, they're wanting to
unfortunately for them,
very badly.
Incompetent communists. It's 90 miles from our shores, and having a failed state 90 miles from our shores is a threat to the national security of the United States.
Wednesday, June 3rd, was the 95th birthday of former Cuban president and Fidel's younger brother, Raul Castro. He was a key figure in the Cuban Revolution and remains a powerful figure in Cuban politics, despite having stepped down in 2018.
Last month, on May 20th, Cuban Independence Day, the Trump administration unsealed an indictment against Raul Castro for murder and other crimes over the 1996 shootdown of 2 planes flown by Cuban exiles from Miami who were part of the anti-Castro group Brothers to the Rescue, founded by the CIA operative Jose Basulto. 2 days later, President Trump threatened Cuba once again, saying it was likely he would order military strikes.
Other presidents have looked at this for 50, 60 years doing something, and it looks like I'll be the one that does it, so would be happy to do it.
For more, we're joined by the Pulitzer Prize-winning historian at Princeton University, Ada Ferrer, professor of history and the author of Cuba and American History, which won a Pulitzer Prize. Her latest book is a memoir about growing up between Cuba and the United States. It's called Keeper of My Kin, Memoir of an Immigrant Daughter. Professor Ferrer, welcome to Democracy Now! Start off by responding to the latest, the indictment of now the 95-year-old former president, Raul Castro. Marco Rubio, is it pushing hard for is it overthrow? Is it change of administration? But the fact is, he said that it's a threat to the national security of the United States being just 90 miles offshore.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me, Amy. It's good to be here. May has been such a busy month in terms of the U.S. pressure campaign against the Cuban government. You mentioned the indictment of Raul Castro. There have been the hardening of secondary sanctions against Cuba, and that is all having an effect on the ground. Just a couple of days ago, Spanish and Canadian companies involved in tourism and hotels have announced that they're pulling out or partially pulling out. So the situation there is dire. It has been for quite some time, and it's gotten worse and worse over the last 5 months. So, you know, it's so hard to predict what will happen, in part because Donald Trump is unpredictable. But there's no question that it's the Cuban people who are bearing the brunt of the policies of both governments.
And Professor Ferrer, if you could also respond specifically to Rubio's comments in this regard. Marco Rubio himself, a Cuban American, at the House Foreign Affairs Committee hearing on Tuesday, evading a question about whether the Trump administration plans to invade Cuba, and then describing Cuba as a failed state threatening U.S. national security.
Yeah, I mean, he says Cuba is a threat because it's 90 miles from its shores and it's a failed state. But, you know, the geographic position of Cuba hasn't changed last I looked. I don't have access, obviously, to the kind of internal documents that they do. But given the hardships in Cuba, given the fact that right now the government can't provide water and electricity, it's hard to think about it as a serious threat to a government like the U.S., which is so powerful.
And who do you
in terms of invading, I mean, sorry.
No, please go ahead, Professor.
Well, in terms of invading, I mean, Trump has been threatening that since January, since the Maduro operation. You know, people thought, he said in the beginning that it would happen within days, you know, for Cuba, the Cuban government would fall within days. That obviously didn't happen. He's perfectly capable, I think, of invading, as is Rubio, as is this government. But, you know, it's hard to predict from one day to the next. You see what's happening in Iran, what's happening in this country, and, you know, it's hard to say. But I have no doubt that Trump would do that if he thought it would work.
And Professor Ferrer, if you could, you know, your position, broadly speaking, has been one in which you're absolutely against American imperial ambitions in Cuba, and also those being the cause of much of the suffering in Cuba, in particular with this increase in the level of sanctions that the U.S. has imposed on Cuba. But you have simultaneously also criticized the government in Cuba. If you could talk a little bit about this and why you think it's essential to hold both these positions simultaneously.
Yeah, so I think, I mean, it's clear the embargo's done harm to the Cuban people, and the really intensified sanctions since January have as well. My sense is that the Cuban government is not focused. Its priority is not the well-being of the Cuban people right now. It has made decisions in the short run and in the long run that have not prioritized them. So, for example, it invests, even with tourism in decline, it has continued until recently to invest heavily in tourism, ignoring sectors of the economy such as agriculture, education, health, all of which are in horrible decline. Even going back, I started traveling to Cuba in 1990, which was shortly before the fall of the Soviet Union and the Eastern Bloc. So I spent a lot of time there in what is called the special period. Fidel Castro called it the special period in time of peace. And part of the way that the Cuban government survived the fall of the Eastern Bloc, which was its patron and provided most of the petroleum and subsidies that kept the Cuban state afloat. Part of the way they handled that was to turn to tourism. So I spent a lot of time there in the early 90s, and you would see the water trucks, that the speaker you featured just a few minutes ago talked about, and you'd see these huge water trucks in front of tourist hotels while people in Havana had no water. And you can't ignore basic infrastructure for 30 years and divert all investments to tourism and not expect it all eventually to come crumbling down. And so what Cubans are living through now is the combined effect of a long-standing embargo and a government that has not invested significantly in basic infrastructure and in well-being, in particular, over the last 30 years.
Well, Professor Farah, now we would like to turn to your remarkable memoir, Keeper of My Kin, Memoir of an Immigrant Daughter, in which, of course, you tell your own story, the story of you and your family between Cuba and the U.S., the story of your migration to the U.S. But, of course, what you write about has much wider and broader implications for how we understand migration generally. And I'd just like to read to you from your book, right at the beginning, you have 3 notes to the reader, the third of which reads, quote, "The consequences of migration are many. One is that people often have to live the intimacy of family across multiple languages, the burden and privilege of translation falling usually to the children." So, first of all, if you could talk about your own position as that, at least in your initial years in the U.S., and what that means in terms of how migrants, what they experience as they come to the U.S.
Yeah, this is, the book is an immigrant memoir, so it's the story that many immigrants share about living between two places. It is also a story about family separation, which is such an important topic given what's happening in the U.S. right now. So at the heart of the story is my own migration with my mother from Havana in 1963. And when we came to the U.S., well, there were no direct flights because it was after the Cuban Missile Crisis and those had been suspended, but we went to Mexico briefly and then joined my father in New York. We left behind my brother, my mother's son from a first marriage, who was 9.5 years old. So our life in the U.S. began with that absence at its heart. So leaving behind my brother, my grandparents, and it's what many immigrants have to do. Sometimes politics can make all that a lot harder. In the case of Cuba, there was no such thing as going back. Cubans in the U.S. and abroad weren't allowed to go back for short visits until 1979. And it was hard for military-age men to migrate. So a lot of times, separations that people had hoped would last maybe a few months or a year or two stretched into many years and decades. So, and I hear echoes of it in so many things today. I hear it, listening to some of the people interviewed at Delaney Hall, the boy who graduated and his father couldn't be there. That separation family separation is at the heart of so much. And then also I hear it in a continued Cuban migration. Cuba has seen the largest exodus in its history over the last 5-8 years since 2017, 2018. Exact numbers are hard to come by because Cuba hasn't had a census since 2012. But it's predicted that Cuba has lost about 20% of its population, many of them young people who basically see no future in that country and decide literally that the future is another country. And each of those people, or many of those people, leave behind loved ones and leave in a moment of great uncertainty and suffer the effects of family separation, of decisions made by governments who don't frankly think about them enough. So the echoes of our family story and our migration, I see in so many places. I have a niece's daughter right now living here who has been rendered undocumented after the fact by Trump's immigration policies. And I have another cousin who's spent about 6 months in Alligator Alcatraz and is now in Comm Detention Center in Miami. And these are people, contrary to what some of the administration said, have committed no crime and are just trying to live.
In fact, Human Rights Watch says that the Trump administration has deported over 4,300 Cubans to Mexico. We're going to have to leave it there, but we're going to do an interview in Spanish, and we're going to post it online at democracynow.org. Aubri Devashrayee is professor of history at Princeton University. Her new book is Keeper of My Kin, Memoir of an Immigrant Daughter. She won a Pulitzer Prize for her book, Cuba, and American History. That does it for our show. I'll be at IFC tonight at 6:30 for the screening of Steal the Story, Please, a story about democracy now in our 30 years and independent media overall, along with the director, Carl Deal, and Catherine Grody, the actor, will be moderating. Tomorrow night, I look forward to being in Tampa, Florida, celebrating WMNF. We'll be at the Sunray Theater for 6:30 and 7:30 screenings of Steal the Story, Please. Then on to Miami on Saturday, 2 screenings, and then on Sunday at 1 o'clock, another screening as well at the O Cinema. Next week, we'll be in Sheffield, England, and in Belfast, Ireland, and then on to Vermont.
All right. I've been doing all right. You know, just keeping on, keeping on. How are you? I've been trying to do more digital outreach, be on social media platforms, and I just get so annoyed. So I'm not consistent about this at all. But yeah, how have things been with you? So, to finish up national news, things that are happening in the US, I did want to talk about that Adam Homowy, he won his primary, as well as Graham Plattner won his primary, so that will be interesting to see what, they're Democratic primaries, what the primary election will look like, and see how all of that shakes out. I had something a little more profound to say about that, but nope. Can't think of it right now. If I do, we'll see. Oh, I guess, I think a lot of the criticisms of Graham Plattner, those are coming from all directions, both right and left. And I think it's always good to be skeptical of people's intentions when they are running for office. And that hitching our wagons to especially individuals as they are running for office, or individuals who are vying for powerful positions, this is folly. We need to constantly be asking hard questions of people who are wanting to be in these positions of power, but also it just highlights the limitations of electoralism, but how we still need to engage with it since it affects our material conditions. So, I did want to show... Oh, this is so long. I'm going to bring up this instead. There was that Lego situation happening. I was not paying attention to it. I did not care until I found out that it was actually happening in Utah, where I'm located, in a city called American Fork, where I used to live, actually. And people are saying that there are all of these elements of police corruption, police brutality. It's highlighting this larger system of a broken healthcare system that exists in the US. How this older gentleman sold Legos for roughly $100,000 and did not see that money. And that there are these YouTubers that were called instead of, having more legal advice. But again, like, engaging in the legal system is extremely expensive. And that includes even just getting consultation from lawyers, because they cost a ton of money. So that also is highlighted. But the YouTubers that went there, the content creators, were like, what's going on? This is the Utah Mafia, or like Mormon Mafia. And it's like, well, you are in Utah. Most people in law enforcement are going to be Mormon. That's just like how it is here. A lot of people are Mormon here. And that's not to say that there isn't enormous corruption in the police force as well as in the Mormon church, because both of those things are true, and also that they could be happening at the same time in this exact story. But it is just interesting that people were surprised to see their cruelty, because people associate Utah with being like, oh, people are kind of like nice, they're kind of weird, kind of seeming like juvenile and innocent in many ways. No, this is, I mean, juvenile, yes. Innocent, not so much. Perhaps ignorant, intentionally ignorant. But yeah, having had run-ins with cops in American Fork or in just Utah County in general, where that city is located, I could have told you that they would have acted in this way. I mean, if you are in the United States of America and have had any interactions with law enforcement, especially as someone who is marginalized, you would be like, yeah, they're acting like cops. What can you expect? Also, just any place in the world, really, if you are marginalized in a society, that you will have similar treatment. Because over here, this is why we talk about ACAB. All cops are bastards. Pigs, if you will. I think that's all I'm going to get into it. A lot of these videos are super long in talking about Lego stuff. Excuse me. So, just to keep things moving. Utah County, I know. Utah County is brutal. It is not a fun experience to be living there. I have definitely paid my dues, having lived there to go to school at BYU. Lived there for a number of years just because of work. It is bleak. It is very bleak. There are not many accepting places at all in Utah, but I mean, very few and far between. But Utah County is definitely bleak. I think like Provo and Orem, surprisingly, there are a little more spaces where there's more acceptance, or I guess even just like bars. There's more of that, but still, Salt Lake City is the shit by comparison. Yeah, I think that's a good addendum to that, by comparison. I mean, Salt Lake can be really great, but also like it has its own issues of like dealing with people who are more liberal but who are not actually invested in like collective liberation and stuff, being closer to the Great Salt Lake and having that affect everyone's lung health and such. So there is that. But, oh, just to call this out, I did not bring this up earlier. Today I'm inspired by Frida Kahlo, and this is my makeup for today. Hello, Aliana. Welcome. How are you doing? I did want to touch on, though, something that is happening or has happened in local news, is that the LDS Church was not put on this list of like Christian religions by the Pentagon, which like, why are they even engaging in that kind of stuff anyway? And so that's confusing, concerning that they're just doubling down on all of this religious nationalism, no separation of church and state. But Mormons were very upset, and that was very amusing to me to watch all of that fallout, where people are like, but we're Christians. What do you mean? That's like, okay, have you heard of the Nicene Creed? No. It's all just made up. Like, who gives a fuck? Who cares? But it's just funny to witness a lot of Mormons who were very deeply invested in Trump start to see slowly these signs that maybe they aren't actually being cared about, because guess what? Fascists don't care about other people besides themselves. Thank you. Han in the Discord has a picture of a painting of Frida Kahlo as his profile picture, and that inspired me. I love Frida Kahlo. Also, Frida Kahlo just like embracing queer identity. Also, when she was growing up, being more masked, like wearing suits. Very hot, I have to say. I found out my radio is useless because I don't have a repeater device near me. Oh, interesting. Yeah, that's a bummer. I'm sorry. Yeah, especially as we're trying to like defeat all of these technologarchs, like not using their systems and digital devices. It's like all of the nuances that go into that of like they're making it very difficult on us. I'm doing all right, just hanging in there, working away. I can go through phases of being like, I think especially like trying to maintain some groundedness with like posting shit, like being a little more public in certain ways. I'm not normally to be like, hi. I mean, I am a theater kid, but that's its own thing. But just like putting more like content out there where I'm actually expressing my opinions opens yourself up to a lot of vitriol and nastiness, and not nastiness in like a fun way. So there's that. So trying to be like, okay, a lot of the time it's about people like themselves more than it is about me. But like balancing that is interesting. Also, just like a larger reason why I tended and in the past have stayed away from social media. I'm just like, I don't need any of this. But, the radio doesn't transmit through itself since it's mesh core. Oh, yeah, I remember you sending me that website. You need a separate repeater from your companion device. Oh, interesting. So, do they even offer these separate repeaters? I'm curious. It's hard being grounded. Yeah, especially in this digital age where they do. Oh, okay, cool. But I mean, just another thing to buy. So, just the constant need to be spending and spending just is never ending. I guess that could be a lyric if I cared enough. You can buy them online or build them. Oh, interesting. Yeah, building them, that sounds like a lot of work, but also probably a little more secure. But yeah, it's like cost versus time. Time is money, but also if you have the money, that's a trade-off there. That's okay. I'm glad you're having a good time. No worries. There isn't a need to feel like anyone needs to be extremely engaged with the stream. I'm not expecting that from people. I do enjoy the interactions, but there is not pressure to do that. Okay. So I did want to look at the comments here because I don't even really care enough to watch the full video on this. This is a local news station, KSL News Utah. I actually did like a quote for them for a couple of articles recently on the data center. I haven't been as active in that organizing group lately. And like as we're talking about like reactionary elements today within the Communist Manifesto and socialism, I think this is very pertinent because it is very difficult, especially if there isn't already some sort of like organizing mechanism available to get people who are very different in their opinions, but people just wanting to like dictate whatever happens in their own particular way. That like largely this is an indication of people being part of the petty bourgeois or the petit bourgeois, if you will. I'm glad that Nightinalov wasn't around. He was here earlier in the stream to hear my horrible French. Sorry to everyone for that. But there you go. That it's like, it is difficult to be organizing in ways that are effective, where we aren't just eating our own, and that I can get overwhelmed, and sometimes I just need to like take a step back. I don't know how often that's like, is that just being avoidant? Is that being helpful? But also, it can just be exhausting to go back and forth just within the mental exercise in and of itself, let alone like trying things and seeing if they work or not. Whatever. I'm being vague. That's okay. Gonna get high tonight too. Amazing. Love that. I hope you have a great time. I wasn't aware the Pentagon was in charge of religious groups. I know. Yeah, so this video is Pentagon updates religious categories after pushback from Utah lawmakers. So you can see that they're paying attention more, the government in general, like the federal government, because there are people who are also in positions of power that are pushing back, because guess what? They are Mormon. Many of these people who are in these powerful positions. They were so unwilling to label LDS as Christian that they just removed the label completely. I didn't know that. Oh, they're gonna still be so sad. It's a start. Now, what about all religions that got excluded? Hello. About 190 of them? Yeah. But that also goes to show the power of the LDS Church, even though it doesn't get that much coverage or notoriety. I guess over like the past few years, like past 5 years, like some friends and I were talking about this the other day. Kango, we were talking about this. Also a viewer and chatter, that with people like hearing more about like soda stuff, like swig and all of that bullshit, because Utahns, or like within the LDS Church and the word of wisdom, that people are not supposed to drink coffee, that there are all of these soda places that came about, that people around the world were like, what is this? I want this. And it's like, no, you don't want this, because everyone here is getting diabetes. Not to diabetes shame, but also like this, it's not healthy. It's not healthy to have all of this sugar, but it would be a better alternative to have coffee. But there you go. Which, speaking of, oh, this was something else I was going to bring up in terms of state news. So some of you may know that I used to work for the health department in Utah, the state health department, the tobacco prevention and control program, as the media coordinator. So helping with like campaigns and educating about resources. That's how I tried to turn it into this like educational campaign, many educational campaigns about like various types of tobacco and like what is involved with all of like the health consequences, actually connecting people to recovery resources if they are interested in recovering, because all of this is very cut off from people on a money basis, and that when people are wanting to recover from other substances besides tobacco, like it's much easier to have long-term success of abstinence from harder substances when people quit tobacco products at the same time. But I just saw an ad for one of these campaigns the other day on TV that was extremely fear-mongering, where it was extremely graphic, of like showing someone coughing up blood, being rushed to the ER. And I'm like, this was the type of stuff that I tried to push people away from. That it's like, I worked very hard coming from like the substance use recovery world to be like, shaming people is not helpful in the recovery process. Often it can make people relapse, and it only ingrains this already existing feeling of shame that this whole system is built around, but especially in Utah. And of course, now that I'm gone, they did not like any of the changes I wanted to make. So that's like, what the fuck was putting up with all of that shit even for. Trying to have like some sort of education out there that is not just fear mongering, that's based in religion and not smoking, like in the word of wisdom, like as we're talking about the word of wisdom within Mormonism. That is just like endlessly frustrating to me. It's like it doesn't even matter. Like, and this is what happens when you're dealing with people who are in cults, that it's like, it doesn't matter sometimes the amount of information and good resources you have and education and like data to back it up, that it is just about trying to impose beliefs on other people. So, of course, like as soon as I was gone, they went back to all of that bullshit. And I'm just really sad, not just I don't care about like, like all of this even work being gone. Like whatever. Mostly I'm concerned about it like causing harm and just reinforcing the stigma that exists within substance use when people are trying to quit. So it's not a moral issue, it's a health issue. It's a chemical issue. So that's my additional rant for today. Anyway, as a lifelong member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, I can promise you I am a Christian. I know what I believe. We are saved by grace through Jesus Christ. Isn't that Christian? They don't care, sweetie. They don't care, Barbara. Barbara, please. Have you not learned yet? Clearly not. If they included the LDS with a list of Christian organizations, they would have to change the definition of Christian. Mormonism is not Christian. I'm so here for the infighting here, because this person's going off of the definition of the Nicene Creed, and people are very mad. So there we go. As a witness, Gentile, over a period of some 70 of years now, I can state sans equivocation. Okay, I don't care. This person, however they are talking about this, is really annoying. This is how people within Mormonism, they don't think Gentile means non-Jewish, which is what the meaning actually is. Within the Book of Mormon, that book that is viewed as doctrine that people are believing, and it's all just like made up bullshit that is ahistorical, anachronistic in many ways, like everything about it is just a lie, that Mormons consider Gentiles people who are non-Mormon. So like as we were talking about Utah being a Zionist project, that the quote-unquote founding of Utah is just settler colonialism. I was mixing both of those things. That it really is just showing how people are constantly using these definitions to justify their own means, that like Mormons don't actually care about Israel because they care about Jewish people most of the time. That it is because of this larger like Zionist project that they see themselves in, and that they're within Mormonism and like the rapture and stuff, that there is a belief that there will be many Jewish people who are living in Israel, people just living in Palestine, who will die as part of the rapture, that they will then come in and be like, oh, yay, Jesus is back. It's like, this is just another side of Zionism that is absurd and violent and nonsensical. They're under other religion. They put dirt in soda. Yeah, like a dirty Dr. Pepper. Anyway, there is that. I did see this update. I was thinking I was going to go over more in depth, like actually watch this stuff, but since like I live in Utah and like have to deal with it just on a day-to-day basis, I don't want to immerse myself in this, let alone baptize myself by immersion. That's a Mormon joke. In this content, let alone like impose that on all of you. So I'm just sharing it in an anecdotal fashion. So this is a recent update. Kevin O'Leary to shrink size of Utah data center project because of all of the backlash that is happening. So this resistance that is going on, the vocal and very visible resistance that is happening, this matters. And it shows how he is not wanting to have this type of PR be an issue, but he's still going to be pursuing it. And so that is continually something that capitalists will be pursuing. It's that they want to be able to continue their projects. And so even if they do shrink it a little bit, that doesn't mean that it's going away by any means.
Investor Kevin O'Leary and his plans for that massive AI data center in Utah.
And also, it's not the only data center that is in the US, well, that's true, but not the only data center in Utah that is being built and pursued, that there are many that are very harmful and are going to be using up as much, if not more, than some of this energy that this shit show of a data center is projected to use.
He's now saying he's willing to shrink the 40,000 acre project. It's a major reversal from what he told us just last week, right here in Top Story.
We do have about 40,000 acres of which we could use as much as 25%. But remember, this is not farmland. This is arid desert, and it's used for grazeland. And most of the ranchers that have sold this are leasing it back to continue grazing. It's not in anybody's backyard.
Now O'Leary says he has no choice but to slim down
I call
the campus.
bullshit. Also, imagine the fact of like, oh, this justifies like destroying whole ecosystems, just continuing this settler colonialism, and also just constantly stealing land that is sacred from indigenous tribes rather than giving it back. So when we are talking about this land back movement, what it actually means is that at the very least, the government, all of these like private entities that are owning tons and tons of land, like the LDS Church, like the Utah government, as we are seeing how many of the people who actually owned this land to begin with, like right as they were starting to bring about the idea of this project, are people who are representatives, like Stuart Adams and all of and Jerry Stevenson, all of these shitheads that are in positions of power that are just knee deep in this corruption. Not even knee deep. That's just like a phrase, but they're just completely compromised with corruption.
After facing a new wave from political backlash, in a letter obtained by NBC News, O'Leary writing he could cut the size by about half. An update on celebrity investor Kevin O'Leary and his plans for that.
That's still not enough, but okay. There we go. I wanted to get that over with. Shall we get into Banned Book Club, The Bluest Eye? Let's do it. So, for The Bluest Eye, we read the chapter, "Here is the house, it is green and white as a red door. It is very pretty, it is very pretty, pretty, pretty." And this talks about, or starts to introduce more of the background of the Breedlove family that Piccola comes from. And it immediately is setting the scene in talking about areas that have been intentionally restricted from having more resources from the government, that have been forced to live in more of an impoverished state, that it talks about teenagers coming by and loitering around there, and how it's like these conditions like allow like force people to exist in a particular way, that when there is this very targeted marginalization of withholding funds, that it does not happen by accident, obviously, with like the targeted nature of it all, but how it happens on a very colorized basis as well. That we see it talk about families referred to as the G word, so G word families of Roma descent, possibly, Southeast Asian descent, depending on like how they're being perceived by Americans at this time, because Roma people are from the Indian subcontinent. They originate from the Indian subcontinent, where it talks about how before there were people who were Roma living here that who were also in an impoverished state, that this was imposed, that there is this xenophobia and racism that exists for them, but that even before they lived there, that there were Black families living there, Black American families, and how there is this hierarchy based on this prejudice of colorism that is systematized within the American government, how funds are distributed, who actually has rights, who is allowed to do what, to actually be viewed as a human being. So it's talking about all of these layers of marginalization that I think is extremely important, and also another reason why this book is probably banned as much as it is that Toni Morrison is engaging with this in a very clear way, in talking about how there are layers to intersectionality and that they must be taken into account if we are going to get an accurate view of history and also to understand people. There is this particular phrase that I wanted to read that really struck home. Oh, it also is talking about the Greek landlord, how, like, once again, talking about colorism, an immigrant, so someone who is marginalized in many ways, but also, as we're talking about colorism, is able to actually have access to more capital, be in a position of power that some of these other populations of people with darker skin are not able to. It's talking about the house that the Breedlove family lived in. Trying to find this phrase. I should have highlighted this. Oh, she also mentioned, this is a side note, but mentioning like a patchwork quilt of reality. Quilts are a constant theme within Toni Morrison's work, that quilts have been used to are an art form, quite literally, but also particularly for Black Americans, that they were used as a way to help people escape from enslavement and actually have a guide to freedom, or places that they could have slightly more rights. Let's see. Yeah, so it's describing the furniture in particular, also kind of associating this idea of how, like, when people are systematically put in positions of debasement by these power structures, that they are themselves viewed as objects, not human beings. So this is the first time we actually get a description for the family that Pecola comes from. So Charlie is her father, Sammy is her brother, who is older than her, 14 at the time. Pecola is 11. And then it says Mrs. Breedlove. So we don't get a name for her quite yet. Okay, this is what I wanted to read. There is nothing more to say about the furnishings after it was describing the different rooms of their house. They were anything but describable, having been conceived, manufactured, shipped, and sold in various states of thoughtlessness, greed, and indifference. So meaning like, when people are forced to be in certain circumstances, you just are trying to get whatever you have. It's not like this type of intentional way of buying furniture in many ways that comes with access to wealth and capital. And that like having taste, the option of taste is a privilege. And that especially when things are sold cheaply, like the cheapest price, that there is not as much thought put into them. It's just trying to make a profit for as cheap of a product as possible. Cheap in monetary value, but also like the integrity of the product itself. The furniture had aged without ever having become familiar. So this is specifically the section I wanted to read. People had owned it, but never known it. No one had lost a penny or a brooch under the cushions of either sofa and remembered the place and time of the loss or the finding. No one had clucked and said, "But I had it just a minute ago. I was sitting right there talking to..." Or, "Here it is. It must have slipped down while I was feeding the baby." So it's talking about how when people are forced into these conditions that are more, they are not choosing for themselves, that are more squalid, that there is not this option even of, or limited options for creating human relationships and human connection. That is based off of like these pro-social interactions rather than abuse that mimics the larger systems of abuse people are existing in. So this is another continuation of that thought. There were no memories among those pieces, certainly no memories to be cherished. Occasionally, an item provoked a physical reaction, an increase of acid irritation in the upper intestinal tract, a light flush of perspiration at the back of the neck, as circumstances surrounding the piece of furniture were recalled. So like a house that is not full of happiness, that people are not associating it with happy memories, and that like the furniture pieces themselves that are sold are not sold for like encouraging life that because of the circumstances in which they are sold, are not trying to encourage this sort of like humanizing narrative in life for people, but also how abuse in and of itself, like when people are very unhappy and living in circumstances that like it is very difficult to find happiness in because of this marginalization that is outside of people's control, that there is a lot of sadness and obviously trauma that is associated with the types of markings that are in people's areas. And also that these types of furniture represent this marginalization, and that because we live in a society that worships money and is controlled by the bourgeois, that it makes people feel ashamed, in addition to the experiences that these pieces represent. The sofa, for example, it had been purchased new, but the fabric had split straight across the back by the time it was delivered. The store would not take the responsibility. So just talking about how like they didn't even have the chance to like wear in that sofa in a way that was like, oh, we're actually gathering here as a family and like talking and having a good time. That like from the beginning, it was not able to encourage this type of activity and growth of happiness. And then the store says, "Looky here, buddy. It was okay when I put it on the truck. The store can't do anything about it once it's on the truck." So once again, this family that is marginalized in many aspects, especially as we're talking about class and race, but that the father that he is being referred to as Buddy, that is this infantilizing, very bigoted way to be speaking about men of color, but Black men in particular historically has been used to dehumanize and diminish people's humanity when they are actually trying to advocate for their humanity. And then he's saying that he doesn't want the couch if it's said, but I don't want no couch tore if it's bought new. And then the reply is, tough shit, buddy. You're tough shit. It's like, that shouldn't have to be the situation. And that if the Greek landlord, for example, came back and said the same thing, that the reaction might be completely different, would most likely be different. Especially, he would not be referred to as buddy. You could hate a sofa, of course. That is, if you could hate a sofa. But it didn't matter. You still had to get together $4.80 a month. If you had to pay $4.80 a month for a sofa that started off split, no good and humiliating, you couldn't take any joy in owning it, and the joylessness stank, pervading everything. The stink of it kept you from painting the beaverboard walls, from getting a matching piece of material for the chair. Yeah, where it's just like this ripple effect of like, as there are these options of like, oh, let's brighten up the place. Let's find these other things that it's like, it's not encouraging of like finding these things, like as I was mentioning before, that will help humanize people and allow them to have some sort of expression and developing like a family unit and encouraging particular like pro-social experiences. Here we go. Even from sewing up the split, which became a gash, which became a gaping chasm that exposed the cheap frame and cheaper upholstery, it withheld the refreshment in a sleep slept on it. It imposed a furtiveness on the loving done on it. It, like a sore tooth that is not content to throb in isolation, but must diffuse its own... Sorry, I don't know why I'm having a hard time reading right now. But must diffuse its own pain to other parts of the body, making breathing difficult, vision limited, nerves unsettled. So a hated piece of furniture produces a fretful malaise that asserts itself throughout the house and limits the delight of things not related to it. And then this next section that it ends on. The only living thing in the Breedlove's house was the coal stove, which lived independently of everything and everyone, its fire being out, banked, or up, at its own discretion, in spite of the fact that the family fed it and knew all the details of its regimen. Sprinkle, do not dump, do not too much. The fire seemed to live, go down, or die, according to its own schemata. In the morning, however, it always saw fit to die. So, like, no matter what you were trying to do to brighten up the place, literally, or, like, on a temperature basis, that, the conditions are not conducive to actually having more success. So I did want to show this part of the video from the Aaliyah archives that we have been watching over the past few weeks, called Ugliness in the Hostile Earth, the Bluest Eye Book Analysis. It is a really great analysis. She does an excellent job. And she, in this section, because she does analysis on the entire book, so I'm trying to do it like in parts, like have little segments as we're going throughout it, so it isn't spoiling anything as we are reading it. But she is talking about the family unit of the Breedloves here that I wanted to play. Also, this cute cat.
Nature of the white superiority image. Every member in the Breedloves family is tragic. They represent the antithesis of the ideal white family image. They are poor, black, and undesirable. So undesirable, they wore their ugliness, although it did not belong to them. There is a devastating moment where Morrison explains that the Breedloves' struggle wasn't just about poverty, but about a total communal agreement to disappear into the labels they were given. The master had said, "You are ugly people." They had looked upon themselves and saw nothing.
So we haven't gotten to this part, but I do think, is it coming up in the next section? Let me see real quick. I think it might be in this next section, but so like a little bit of a spoiler, but I think this also talks about the points that I was just mentioning that are highlighted in this section that are important and setting us up for these later sections.
To contradict the statement. In fact, support for it leaning at them from every billboard, every movie, every glance. Yes, they had said, "You are right," and they took the ugliness in their hands, threw it as a mantle over them, and went about the world with it. This internalization of ugliness could be viewed as a form of protection from being further inflicted with the pain of not being white. But the downward spiral of the Breedloves begins with Pauline. The complete indifference with which a rusty nail was met when it punched clear through her foot during her second year of life saved Pauline Williams from total anonymity. Slight as it was, this deformity explained for her many things that would have been otherwise incomprehensible. Her general feeling of separateness and unworthiness she blamed on her foot. As Pauline tries to navigate a world that doesn't see her, she falls into the trap of equating her physical appearance with her moral worth, a move that Morrison describes as literal stripping of the mind. Along with the idea of romantic love, she was introduced to another, physical beauty, probably the most destructive ideas in the history of human thought. Both originated in envy, thrived in insecurity, and ended in delusion. In equating physical beauty with virtue, she stripped her mind, bound it, and collected self contempt by the heap. After many attempts to fit within the standard, changing her hair, her clothes, and wearing makeup, Pauline realizes that beauty is not subjective. Before giving birth to Pecola, she is described as a horse by the doctors. This clear act of dehumanization justifies the social caste system of ugliness. Pauline will never live up to the unrealistic beauty standards enforced by structural violence, so she decides to fully entrench herself in her distorted sense of inferiority. She has accepted and acquiesced to the external values and idealization of beauty, highlighted by whiteness, and she accepts her ugliness as her truth. She becomes a cleaning maid for a wealthy white family where she enjoys brushing the daughter's blonde hair out of avoidance of maintaining her own daughter's tangled black puffs of rough wool.
So we also see like this feeling of not feeling beautiful that Pecola exhibits, that we were introduced to even before understanding her family, that it comes from internalizing these systems, and that these systems are taught, but especially when there are authority figures like parents, but that these larger authority figures in society who are dictating who is beautiful, who is worth being a person, who is considered a person or not, that they then also impose these ideas of what is beautiful. And like how we were talking about, I know it was like this funny like satire that we were talking about with the podcast by The Onion that I was showing at the beginning of this, but how he was saying like, yeah, the podcast host to the billionaire, like he was hot, this like blonde guy who like was very manicured and stuff, of like there are these class signals, and also in a society where human beings have been commodified, literally descendants of people who have been commodified, through slavery, that we see this perpetuating larger system of capitalism, that it continues to commodify beauty and who is accepted or who isn't. That these same people who control these aspects of beauty, of who is accepted, they also are the ones who like are owning these means of production, of the entertainment industry, of the beauty industry. They own politicians and then impose these conditions so that they can continue to exploit people and create these hierarchies of human dignity. So I wanted to show that in preparation for this next section. I did want to show this interview with Toni Morrison just from the beginning so that we get more of her insight. This is from the account Manufacturing Intellect. I didn't subscribe already. Shame on me.
Toni Morrison is here. She is everything that one would expect from a great writer, and she has been awarded with a Pulitzer Prize and a Nobel Prize. Her new novel is called Paradise. We want to talk to her about that. We want to talk to her about her life and talk to her about her views on America and the issues facing this country. She has been here before, and I look forward to having her here for the hour. Welcome to this broadcast.
Thank you.
It's great to have you here. How long has this been in the making?
I began thinking about it in '92, right after I finished jazz. I didn't know it was a book at that time. It just seemed like some disparate ideas, little bits and pieces from...
Was there a question you were asking?
Ultimately, yes. How could they do it? How could they do that? How could they put their finger on the trigger and then pull it?
Paradise, for you, is what? The book. The book.
It's an interrogation of the whole idea of paradise. It's a thing we think about, imagine, either in this life or another. All humans do. But when we come up with the solution, it's always sort of limited in some way. It's real estate. It's jeweled streets and fruit, nectar. But more important than anything, the whole lot of people who can't get in. And that's the definition of paradise.
People who can't come in.
That's right.
You went to Brazil, and you took notice of a supposed incident.
Yes.
In which men attack women.
Yes.
Violently.
Yes.
In a cathedral or a convent or something.
Yes, yes.
That gave you the kernel of an idea.
It did. I was asking the question because these women that they had assaulted were black nuns who were in a cathedral, a church that catered and raised young black girls to become nuns. It was hundreds of years old. And according to the story, they had been practicing candomblé, an Africanist religion, in the basement, and Catholicism on the first floor. And they were attacked. Somebody complained, and the police came just to arrest them, but they were frightened and they ran away. And they were shot down. And I only later learned that that was probably untrue. But it wasn't without truth, you know, just because it was not factual. And in that country or in life, and that was the question I put to myself, as I described earlier, how could they do that? How could they shoot some girls for whatever reason and actually pull the trigger, armed men? That was the first question.
Did you find, and do you find here, an answer to that question?
In a way, a little bit. The pack, how perfectly responsible, intelligent, even mature men can behave in a pack, in a group. How easy it is to find reasons for one's interior decay outside in somebody else. How satisfying that is. If something's going wrong in your own little neighborhood and you don't want to face up to that, it's just easier, more secure to find the fault outside. And
Find
also,
a scapegoat.
Indeed. And for men whose security and life depends on a certain kind of family that they control, all of the goodness, all of the strength, all of the wealth of the community is due to them, is due to their intelligence, their courage, their sagacity, their generosity. It has worked for them, and now it's being threatened.
I want to pull back for a moment and talk a little bit more about the town of Ruby. And remember this first line. They shot the white girl first. With the rest, they can take their time. No need to hurry out here. They are 17 miles from a town which has 90 miles between it and any other. Hiding places will be plentiful in the convent, but there is time, and the day has just begun. First paragraph, last mention of someone's race.
Last time.
Last time. More about that later. What is this town?
This is a representative of a whole lot of towns that were founded in Oklahoma and other places after Reconstruction around the turn of the century. And it is paradise. It is heaven. It is an all-black town.
Freed slaves looking for something.
Looking for a place where they don't have to respond to white terror or intervention, where they can be the best that they can be, where they're secure, where they can, be men, make families, reproduce in paradise, in a closed haven.
Isolated.
Totally isolated, so that they can grow and blossom, which they do for a while.
And there's the convent 17 miles away.
That's right.
And who's in the convent?
Originally, it was a pleasure house for an embezzler. And when that collapsed, a society of women, some nuns, purchased it to educate Native American girls, which worked for a few years, and then that collapsed. So now it's a place to crash. The nuns are gone. There's just the old servant there. One by one, some women show up there. And for various reasons, stay there or go away and come back.
Okay, I didn't want to interrupt her. Also, to educate Native American girls, the fact that, girls were even being offered a type of education, that's a good thing. But especially considering, if it was a Catholic school, we also need to be considering what kind of education these indigenous girls were receiving, that it was most likely another form of colonization and forced assimilation there. So, the layers of all of this are important to look at.
And for them, it's shelter from, aggravated lives, from brutality, or from their own secrets and their own personal demons, things they just haven't faced up to. So they all live there in some chaos, some dysfunction, but together, nobody's bothering them. And the old woman doesn't much care what they do.
It's as time as 1976, this book. This awful crime is committed. What is it that they fear about the convent?
The men?
Yes.
They have male fears, which is they feel besieged. They feel that when women are loose, anything can happen. If you can't control the race, if you can't levy taxes, you can't decide who is legitimate and who is not. You can't decide to whom the children belong. And you can't tell the women what to do. Then you have no authority for these men who are 50s men. They fought in the wars.
They came back.
They're
after,
representative of men at that time.
Right.
Yes, exactly.
Came back after World War II.
That's right.
And they've watched what's happened in the 60s. And they've watched the children
They're
change.
horrified.
And they're horrified by change.
Horrified.
Because they're in isolation.
They're in isolation, and they're not so different from a lot of African-American people in the late 50s and 60s. You know, nowadays, everybody loved Martin Luther King Jr. Everybody was involved passionately in the civil rights. It's like everybody in France was in the resistance. But at the time, there were
History tells
difficulties.
different.
Yes, there were people who were worried about stirring up things. There were people who had made peace. There were people who knew their strategies worked, and they didn't want anything that different. And these...
This is specifically about the book Paradise, but many of these concepts are still, I mean, like, it's being placed in a different, like, historical moment, but many of these concepts are very similar to what is happening in the Bluest Eye.
People represent that element of African-American communities that were very wary of change, of aggressive change, nonviolent though it may be. It really was penetration into the dime stores and the buses and insisting on rights overnight and getting oneself hurt. So these people represent that section of the community.
How do you... Is it just your gift of language that you find the capacity to get at the heart of violence?
I work at it. And think about it a lot. So much of that is alien to me, you know. I don't know what it's like to really feel good beating up somebody. I don't really know what it's like to ostracize somebody. But it's so ordinary a part of human life. You have to try to figure out, what are they thinking? What is that terror? What do they think is going to fall if they don't assault those people? You know, I was originally going to call this book War.
Yeah, I know.
Because it seemed to me that that's really what it was about, not the great military battles, but just how it is that violence becomes the solution for some so-called worthy cause.
Where does this is the third of a trilogy.
Yes.
Beloved, Jazz, Paradise.
Mm-hmm.
Where does it fit? Explain to me where this fits as a part of a trilogy.
Well, the first two were about love, excesses, distortions, a love of a mother for a child that was all-inclusive.
She'd rather see her dead than back in bondage.
That's right. That kind of love.
Jazz is about the love of a man for a young woman.
Mm-hmm. Romantic love that is irrational, excessive, irrational. I cannot live without you, literally. And Paradise is about love of God, when people truly believe, not in the sort of vaguely secular, halfway religious notion of perhaps there is a God, or I hope there's one, and not with disdain. I didn't want to write about people whose faith was absolute and whose relationship with their God was intimate and who had conversations, dreams, visions, who had a really close relationship with their Maker. I don't want to discredit that and pretend that it's not real or true or not common. And enhancing. These people really believe that their lives are structured by and glorified by God. That kind of love, which passeth all understanding, which is simply faith. I wanted to, try to describe that and try to describe how that love also can go awry, can be like the others.
Do you think it's been sometimes said that I grew up in the South, as you know, and I would go to black churches mainly for the music. But there was always the notion that because African Americans had suffered, that there was a stronger bond somehow with God
than with white people and God.
Because there was a belief that there was going to be a deliverance. That
You're being like, say it. Say what you mean.
There's a lot of that.
What a weird thing to say, too.
And it
but
worked.
Also,
it really did.
Plenty of white people thinking that of just going for the music. That's another form of exploitation, and like exactly what happened with like the art of jazz, or really any art form that has been created by Black Americans, where it's like, oh, we're going to enjoy the art and then leave without actually trying to understand history. What a weird thing to say.
Well, otherwise, how could those people have survived that? How could they, knowing full well that the preference was that they disappear, die, work themselves to death? How could they? Without the gospel for inspiration, without preachers who cared about them, without the community of the church, without that music.
Without there having to be some higher power
Absolutely.
Who was not evil.
They were on a moral plateau that was unassailable.
Right.
They knew that this was not the real nature of God's universe. And they could endure this hell because there was something better. There had to be. There were promises made.
And kept or not kept?
They felt kept. Not so much. The early ones, of course, assumed it would be in the next life.
And the Civil Rights Revolution was infused by
church.
Religion.
Absolutely.
And church. Would not have happened without black
Could
churches.
Not have.
Could not have happened.
Because the churches are not only the religious sources of people's inspiration, they're very political and community-minded. They're the places where people can meet, can assemble. They may not be able to do that anywhere else in a town. They're the places where you know what's going on. They are the leaders of the community, in a sense. Those women and those men who are in those churches already had laid the groundwork for anybody coming down there in the civil rights movement. They were already there. And they had hidden one another, protected one another.
Yeah, from the time of slavery.
That's right, from the beginning. And they had functioned under duress since, they got here. They had preached in caves, in what they used to call quilt churches. Mm-hmm. All of that. And they understood what pressure they were under. So that they were absolutely critical to the civil rights movement and to the life of African Americans.
I mentioned race is on the first sentence. You don't want the reader to know race because what?
Well, I have a very, very raced community, which is the town.
All black.
All black. That becomes clear instantly in the 2 or 3 pages. Everybody in this town is black. That's who they are, and that's why they're there. The other community consists of women, and I withhold the information about their race for a couple of reasons. One principal reason was I wanted to sort of underscore how we distort race, how we have so much baggage ourselves as readers that we bring to a narrative, that we, if you don't say somebody's black,
you assume it's white.
That's right. So that's true in literature. If you say they're black, then they're black. If you don't identify race, the assumption is that they're white.
You want to break through that?
Absolutely.
You also want to say that race is the least
Such a brilliant way
informing
to challenge
piece of information
this whole concept of
about a
centering
person.
whiteness and people's
When I know that you're
assumptions.
white, I only know stereotypical information about you. I only know, assumptions about you. But as an individual, I don't know anything about you. That's like knowing you have 2 ears on your head. That's all that is. However, it doesn't mean that race doesn't matter. It matters a great deal, but that's because we've made it matter. We have made it matter. So now, culturally, politically, and economically, it does. But when you think about one-on-one relationships, it doesn't. And when the reader looks at these women, some readers never think about whether which one is white or black or what have you. Others are disturbed because they don't really know. And I've had a lot of fun, I have to tell you,
I know you have.
because one reviewer says, with a great deal of authority, a runaway white girl. And another reviewer says so-and-so who is white. And another one says a third person. But it's not a question of a question for them. What's interesting to me, they don't wonder if they're right about who is the white girl. They say it with absolute certainty. And I have to admit, that's fun for me because I know why they think this one is white or that one and so on.
Speaking of reviews, you're on the cover of Time magazine, the sound and fury of Toni Morrison. With her new novel, Paradise, the Nobel laureate shows that she's the great American storyteller. 60 Minutes.
I think
Our
that's
friend
still
Ed
true.
Bradley's profile
That's still true to this day.
most watched American television program. Everybody's talking about this book. The New York Times had 2 reviews. They could not have been more diametrically opposed.
That's true.
One said, this is far from your best work, compared it to Beloved and said, everything that made Beloved good
Made
makes
this
this
one
bad.
bad.
The other said, this is her best work. What do you think about all that?
Well, I've been out here a long time.
This is not your first rodeo, is it?
This is not my first rodeo. It's not my first deeply critical review. I've had lots. Some of them I respect because they're done by people who have a long history of writing reviews carefully, and some I don't. I read them all.
And
The
informed
bad
by some.
review is bad if it's non-complimentary. One of those reviews in the New York Times was not just bad, it was insulting because it was not careful. It wasn't a thoughtful review. I don't mind anybody saying this is inferior work, this is mediocre. I mean, there are books all over the world that I loathe, and I don't want anybody to tell me I can't loathe them, even if I admire some other works they do. That's not the point. The point is I like a little careful respect and thoughtfulness. I don't like a bad review that's badly written. Now that's insulting to me.
And insulted because it wasn't a careful consideration, didn't try hard enough to understand what you were trying to get at in this book.
It was like an 11th grade student who turns in a review of a book report, and says, I hated this book. It's not as good as something else. And what you do, if you're the 11th grade English teacher, you just give it back to them. And so you have to be better at explaining your reasons than this. That's what I thought about that.
Did you write a letter? Did you?
Oh, no, Charlie, I
complain?
would spend a lot of time writing letters about even good reviews when they miss the point.
Yeah.
There are lots.
And in fact,
That's
good
more
reviews could
disturbing
be
to me.
as sophomoric as
Of
you
course.
think this review was, because they might have missed it and just simply
Absolutely.
joined in the
Yeah.
praise
No.
because you were a Nobel laureate.
That's right. They may have done that and just missed it completely. But people are entitled to that, I mean, I would prefer that they were all useful in some publicity way. But I really wait for, scholarship.
Well,
and I
tell me
wait
what's
for
the most
long reviews.
insightful thing you have read about this book. Someone else looking at what you've done, not you, and saying, this is what I see. What rang
I wish he would have let her. He's been interrupting her quite a bit, just like letting her finish her thoughts.
a bell for you in terms of understanding what Toni Morrison was about in this book?
Well, there were little lines that I remember in Paul Gray's observations.
Which is in
the Time magazine piece. When he made some reference to the shallowness of considering me a feminist novel.
Yeah. The reason is this is men versus women, and because you are, in a sense, portraying these women as victims, or they're perceived as victims, you're therefore writing a feminist tract.
And that's the shallowest reading of the book. Not the only shallow reading it can receive, but it certainly is one shallow reading, I think. I think there's much more there. And if there isn't, then it's my fault. But the point is that I do not write out of these categories. This is the one place where I can do anything. I do not have to be, I don't have to speak for. I don't represent a group. I don't, I'm not, whatever my political, associations are, that's not where I work them out. I don't work them out in literature. Literature for me is something else. It's a free place. It's a very hard place. It's where philosophically things trouble me, and I am trying to approach and help and hope the reader accompanies me on some inquiry about these things. These women are not held up as saints, and the men are not demons. I don't write comic books. It's much more complicated than that for me. And when I am reduced to category A or B, which I have been a lot, I just, blink a little bit and go on. But I have to tell you that the reviews about Paradise and much African-American literature are infinitely superior to what they were 20 years ago, when everything was read as a sociological tract. Everything was read as though it had this agenda, as though there was only one black narrative. And there are hundreds of them, thousands perhaps. And that's what's reflected in the reviews of other people's books and also in mine, so that when I see the differences between those two reviews you mentioned, or 3 or 4, it's tantamount to me that there is no single black narrative and that one person has a hold on it and that everybody knows what it is.
And we should say that's perfect. That's better. That's
It's
much
infinitely better.
Hosanna.
Yes.
The idea of writing about race, or the absence of race. Phil Moyers, I think, once asked you the question, can you imagine writing a novel that's not centered about race? And you said, absolutely.
Yes.
Will you?
That's what he asked me. I think, you see, I answered the question he didn't pose. Tolstoy writes about race.
Yeah.
All the time. So does Zola, so does James Joyce. Now, if anybody can go up to an imaginary James Joyce and say, you write about race all the time. It's central in your novels. When are you going to write about what? Because you see, the person who asks that question doesn't understand that he or she is also raced.
Yes.
So to ask me when am I going to stop, if I can, is to ask a question that, in a sense, is its own answer. Yes, I can write about white people. White people can write about black people. Anything can happen in art. There are no boundaries there. Having to do it or having to prove that I can do it is what was embarrassing or insulting. In this book, I did.
It was insulting that people, help me understand, what was insulting? The idea that you felt like you had to...
Oh my God. Okay. Tell me, why is that offensive? Because you weren't asked this kind of shit, dude. That, as a white person, despite us living in a racialized society, if you are white or perceived as white, that you are not asked these kinds of questions because people are always expecting, because they just assume, like what she has been talking about, that whiteness is the rule, rather than talking about, oh, like if you are actually wanting to engage in a good faith conversation about like we're all humans and like we should all be able to write about like whoever, if it's done in good faith with research and is like insightful and not dehumanizing, but how it also is just showing that like the fact that you aren't understanding is showing that like there are certain experiences that you are refusing to try to understand and that you have privilege for not understanding because of this ignorance of constantly centering whiteness and what it means to exist as a white person within white supremacy. Ugh. That's annoying. She just continually, like, he hasn't, out of many of the interviews that she has gone through, this seems to be a little more, especially at this time, on more of a respectful basis, but still, people are just wildly ignorant of not really wanting to even get into the heart of the novel. It just constantly is a conversation that is about race, not about like these structures of what it means to even have race exist and what it means to be humans within these structures. That's like, those are the kinds of questions that she's more interested in. At least that's like from what I gather in her writing and what I gather from like what she has been saying in these interviews. It's just like, come on, dude. Anyway, we'll keep watching that for Culture Corner on Friday. I did want to watch this. C.L.R. James and Stuart Hall talk about Marxism and decolonization. Just as I have been talking about the need to decolonize Marxist thought, but also in this larger conversation of we need to redefine what leftism means, that it can't just be anti-capitalism, that is where it starts. We have to go much further than that. We have to say that leftism starts at anti-capitalism, anti-colonialism, anti-ableism, anti-racism, anti-sexism, anti-queerphobia, that it's like we have to be considering all of these aspects of marginalization that like that uphold a thing like capitalism, but that without capitalism, these things can still exist and do exist. And they have been the defeat and major issues as to like why these Marxist leftist movements have not been successful is because like not only just like infighting like about like philosophy and diversity of tactics, types of tactics, and like people just having like different opinions about things, but also because there are these embedded structures of bigotry and discrimination that are internalized, that are upheld even with outside this capitalist system. That like we do need to get rid of capitalism in order to actually have more equality for all human beings, but like it can't just stop there. That like we need to be decolonizing our minds. And when I'm saying decolonizing, it's not just about talking about like the history of colonization and like the need to reclaim history. That's still an important aspect, but also talking about like how there are these very real structures that have been, and like these ways of thinking of like how we're talking about like with Toni Morrison, of people feeling constantly centered in a conversation, whether that is maleness, whether that is being able-bodied or like cisgender or straight, that like all of this, or like what is considered able-bodied, that like all of that has to be decolonized. Not just talking about like the need for giving land back, which there is a very serious need to do that, but like to reclaim what it means to even be a human being. That has to be the hallmark of leftism. That has to be where we draw the line, because anywhere and anyone that like falls outside of that scope cannot be considered a leftist. Otherwise, like, what are we even doing? Like, we aren't able to actually break down these oppressive structures in an effective way if we are seriously considering collective liberation as leftists, if we are to call ourselves leftists. Okay. This is by the Black Radical.
Persuaded by Trotsky's account of the Russian Revolution.
I was persuaded by...
I haven't seen their content before, but I was very impressed with all of this, even like looking at the description of things. Just trying to be as inclusive as possible with laying out the transcript, not just having it be auto-generated.
And by Trotsky's account of what had happened in the Soviet Union.
I read, but I must say, I read the Stalinist account. I bought the Stalinist books, I read them. Both of them were referring to Lenin. I bought the 12 volumes of Lenin, read them, referring to Marx, and I bought Capital Volume 1, the 18th movement of Louis Bonaparte. I read all of those, and then I said, no, I am a Marxist and I want to join the Trotskyists. But I had read them before so when I went in there, they didn't have to teach me anything. I had to teach them.
And there was one Trotskyist organization in that period.
There never is one Trotskyist organization. But there is one organization, and there are one or two around. But it hadn't split up really then. Not only was the Trotskyist organization in Britain, it was international. We used to go to Paris and have conferences there, and I always went to the conference. And to be quite honest, I went because it was good to go to an international conference, but I thought the food was wonderful. So I always went to every conference. I had 3 or 4 days eating, because in England, oh, God of mercy.
But you were also very active in Trotskyist politics in England in that period, because I know people who heard you speak
I
a lot.
was the secretary of the British Trotskyist organization. Oh yes, I was very active. Not only was I very active, I was known as such. And people used to say, not only I was a Trotskyist, I'm just talking about history, that is the real Marxist in England. All that before the war. I had a real reputation in Britain because I didn't only know about Trotsky and Stalin, I had read the classics of Marxism, and my memory, I understood them. So people would send for me to Bristol, Glasgow, Aberdeen, Nottingham, North Wales, South Wales, Swansea, all over the goddamn place. Come and talk. And they didn't want to hear so much about Trotskyism. They wanted somebody who would talk about Marxism, very much concerned about the theories of Marxism, and somebody who would expound it.
James became deeply involved with the African independence movement,
Yeah,
editing
these auto
pamphlets
captions
and
are
working closely
awful.
with George Padmore, a fellow Trinidadian. Padmore was not a Trotskyist, but a communist who'd spent a number of years working in Moscow, but who by this time was primarily concerned with colonial freedom and the anti-imperialist struggle.
Padmore and I had known one another as boys, 10 years old, in the Caribbean. His father was a teacher, my father was a teacher. They both were friends, and they used to meet and speak, and George and I used to play together. But his father's name was Nurse, Alfonso Nurse, and he was Malcolm Nurse. Then he left and went away, and I in the Caribbean began to read as the years went by and hear about a revolutionary leader named George Padmore. So I come to England. We come to England in 1932. Somewhere in 34, 35, I hear that Padmore is coming from America or is going to have a meeting in London. So I go to see the great man. I go and see Malcolm Nurse. So he said, well, boy, how is it? And after the meeting, we went somewhere and having something to eat till 4 in the morning talking.
In spite of your political differences, you and Padmore are increasingly able to work together.
We were always able to work together. George would be in the Communist Party, I was a Trotskyist, but that didn't matter. We would always meet and talk and eat together.
And is that around the African question? And
no, it wasn't. We were friends and became friends. Padmore was a great admirer of Marxism. And although he had left the Moscow people, he made me to understand that for him, Marxism still remained the center of his political ideas. And we formed the Pan-African Congress.
When was that?
About 1937, I believe. I was the chairman. It was very vague. We got together, but we chiefly told the idea of Africa. Caribbean didn't matter so much. He was full of the African history, Marxism, and I was full of the European history, which he appreciated as something. I used to insist that Marxism takes off from where the historians, politicians, and economists of the bourgeois society finished. There Marxism begins, political economy and so forth. And Padmore very much appreciated that. In addition to that, he was a very social person, a very fine person. He's very good looking, very elegant, and so forth. And a Marxist, undeviating, but ready to talk to anybody. He was one of the old West Indian types. I don't know if you know what I mean. The old Victorian type. He was one, but a Marxist. And he didn't lose that. The old Victorian, you know, it was easy enough to imagine him in a frock coat and a topper. But he wasn't, but he was an elegant person, fine manners, speech, style, sympathetic, friendly, but undeviating Marxist. Oh, yes. Now let me tell you, the persons whom I remember most clearly are George Padmore, Kenyatta, myself, one or two Nigerians. But Kenyatta was no more a Marxist than he was a follower of John Milton. Kenyatta joined the movement because it was a struggle against the imperialists. Padmore kept a balance, but his orientation was to make the movement be aware of the colonial struggle. I was the chairman, but Padmore was the one. Padmore taught me the importance of Pan-Africa.
Okay, so that was giving more of a background as to like examples of people who have been engaging in more decolonized thought where it is based off of anti-imperialism, and I think that is important to note and to get more information on. There is another video that we don't have time for today, but I want to watch tomorrow, that gets into how like there are more of the nuances and specifics as to what it actually means to decolonize Marxist thought. In some of the previous readings, so I mentioned at one point, I'm like, this doesn't really have as much of like a feminist reading, which like in the next section, like I had forgotten in the Communist Manifesto that they had written about how like women can be used as a means for production for like creating laborers. So that doesn't mean that there isn't like a complete disregarding of like women as human beings, but also that it was not necessarily like at the forefront, especially with how certain language is used, particularly in terms of like patriarchy and talking about like man as all of humankind. And like the language that we use is extremely gendered and indicative of like not just gendered, but like indicative of these other larger systems of oppression that like we need to be engaging with constantly. Okay, So this is Section 3, Socialist and Communist Literature, Reactionary Socialism. Feudal socialism. The French and English aristocracy were led by their historical position to write pamphlets against modern bourgeois society. In the French Revolution of 1830 and in the English Reform movement, they succumbed again to the hated upstart. A serious political contest was thenceforth out of the question. A literary battle alone remained possible. But even in the domain of literature, the old cries of the Restoration period had become impossible. To arouse sympathy, the aristocracy must appear to lose sight of its own interests, and to formulate its indictment against the bourgeoisie in the interests of the exploited working class alone. It prepared for vengeance by singing lampoons on its new master, and singing? Maybe this is using this in a way. I'm going to look this up. I'm also revealing that I have not read this in a long time. Singing lampoon. So I know like a lampoon, like that's a way to talk about like that's a type of commentary. It can be like biting. I'm guessing it's singeing, just because they're spelled the same way. Just if we're looking at the context. Wow, I wasn't sure if that was like a term for like shooting lampoons because I'm not familiar with like as much military warfare vernacular, but I'm guessing it's singeing because it's talking about criticisms. Anyway, thanks for indulging me in that exercise. It's okay to look things up if you don't know what they mean. It prepared for vengeance by singeing lampoons on its new master, and by whispering in his ear sinister prophecies of impending ruin. In this manner arose feudal socialism, a mixture of lamentation, pasquinades. I'm also not familiar with that. Or pasquinade? Where does this word come from? Satire lampoon, originally one displayed or delivered publicly in a public space. Pasquinade. What's the origin of this? Pasquino. Okay, so coming from Pasquino. Pasquinade is probably the like original pronunciation. I'm gonna see. As I saved Edom Online. Going back to there. Hi, Timmy. Okay, here we go. A libelous public lampoon, 1650s from French, so pasquinade. From Italian, pasquinata. From Pasquino, name given to a mutilated ancient statue, now known to represent Menelaus, dragging the dead Patroclus. Set up by Cardinal Carafa in his palace in Rome in 1501. The locals named it after a schoolmaster or tailor or barber named Pasquino who lived nearby, a custom developed of posting satirical verses and lampoons on the statue. Okay. I don't think I have encountered this word since the last time I read this. That's how obscure this is, not used very often. But I love that background. Thank you once again, Tan, for guiding me to Edam Online, because I would use like the OED, the Oxford English Dictionary, when I actually had access to it. But you have to have a subscription. In this manner arose feudal socialism, a mixture of lamentation, pasquinades, echoes of the past, and menaces of the future, by its witty and lacerating criticism, striking the bourgeoisie to the very heart, but yet remaining ridiculous through its total incapacity to understand the march of modern history. As their banner, the aristocrats waved aloft the alms bags of the proletariat in order to rally the people around them. But as often as the working class joined them, it caught sight on their hindquarters of the old feudal escutcheon. Escutcheon? Jesus. I haven't come across this word since reading this as well. Escutcheon. Escutcheon. Okay, so a shield or emblem bearing a coat of arms, a flat piece of metal for protection and often ornamentation around a keyhole, door, handle, or light switch. I didn't even want to, how they said pasquinades. I didn't like that because I feel like I should know better. Like, pronounce it a little more, like, close to its origin. Yeah, so shield on which a coat of arms is depicted from the late 15th century, from Old North French, escutcheon, escutcheon. Variant, so escutcheon, escutcheon. Variant of Old French escusson, half-crown coin, coat of arms, heraldic escutcheon, from Vulgar Latin. Vulgar, you say? Scutionem, from Latin scutum. Shield, from PIE. Scoito, piece of wood, shield. Sheath, shield. Also, source also of Old Irish, Seath. Welsh, whoa, Usgood. Breton, Scode, shield. Old Prussian, Staten, shield. Probably a noun derivative of a variant of PIE. What does PIE mean? Okay, let's do this. Proto-Indo-European. Wow. We're learning a lot today. There we go. Back to the reading. But as often as the working class joined them, it caught sight of their hindquarters of the old feudal escutcheon, and dispersed with loud and irreverent laughter. One section of the French Legitimists and Young England presented this spectacle at its best. When the feudalists point out that their method of exploitation was different from bourgeois exploitation, they only forget that they exploited under circumstances and conditions that were quite different and are now superannuated. When they point out that the modern proletariat did not exist under their rule, they only forget that the modern bourgeoisie was a necessary offspring of their own social system. Yeah, hello. For the rest, they conceal so little the reactionary character of their criticism that their chief accusation against the bourgeoisie is precisely that under its régime, because it's spelled like with the accent above the E, is developed a class which will shatter to pieces the old social system. They upbraid the bourgeoisie not so much for having created a proletariat as for having created a revolutionary proletariat. In political practice, therefore, they join in all coercive measures against the working class, and in ordinary life they stoop, in spite of all their vapory phrases, to pick up the golden apples dropped from the tree of industry, and to barter truth, love, and honor for traffic in wool, beetroot sugar, and spirits. As the parson has ever gone hand in hand with the landlord, so has clerical socialism gone hand in hand with feudal socialism. Which honestly, I think, like, talking about the distinction between the aristocrats and the bourgeoisie, that it's like we have had them become the same thing. Who is it that talks about techno-feudalism? Oh, what is his name? He's Greek, I believe. Techno-feudalism. Yanis Varoufakis. Is that how you say his name? That's how I say it in my head. Yanis Varoufakis. Yeah. Yeah, he, in his book, Techno-Feudalism, What Killed Capitalism, I'll share this as well, since this is not an AI overview. Argues that capitalism has been replaced by a new system where big tech companies act as feudal lords, extracting rent, fees, data from users and businesses through their digital platforms rather than generating profit through traditional market competition. Traditional market competition that's based off even more of the labor of workers. In this techno-feudal system, users become digital serfs, providing free labor, data, while platforms control the fiefdoms, digital spaces, creating a new power structure that undermines democracy and traditional capitalism. Okay. Nothing is easier than to give Christian asceticism a social veneer. Has not Christianity also declaimed against private property, against marriage, against the state? In their place, has it not preached charity, celibacy, mortification of the flesh, monasticism, and the church? Yeah, of like, that's the holiest is when you give up family and these like systems, larger worldly systems. Christian socialism is but the holy water with which the priest consecrates the envy of the aristocrat. So this also is something that is like good to talk about within, like how we were talking about earlier, the LDS church. There is something called like the bishop's storehouse, where people who actually are like paying their fast offering, so like in addition to tithing, which is like 1/10 of people's income, which is a fuck ton of money that the church gives, that you cannot be found worthy of ordinances, particularly of going into the temple if you're not paying this tithing. Excuse me. But also with fast offerings, this goes towards the bishop's storehouse, which technically sounds like it's a good thing, where people who are not able to afford things, they can get like groceries, some of their basic necessities at a much cheaper price, and which I think you still need to pay, right? Do you need to pay? We accessed the bishop's storehouse at one point. I need to look that up. But even if you don't pay at all, like the price is very, very cheap. And this is a type of socialism, even like a type of like communist approach to making it so that like people who have less actually have access to some. But some resources, so they're not starving, where people are contributing in this collectivist mentality for the larger good, knowing that it goes towards other people. But the issue is that it has been co-opted by these powers that are taking this type of money that is donated to them, that like if they truly were invested in making it so people could afford things, they wouldn't be forcing people to give up tithing and fast offerings in order to be considered worthy for salvation. That is very coercive and manipulative, instead of just honoring people's humanity to begin with and saying like, oh, you can pay dues if you are actually interested in being part of this religious group, and that it is not a requirement for these arbitrary ideas of what it means to be saved, which then all of this money is going towards like these very corrupt endeavors with investing in the stock market and buying up tons and tons of land, of sacred indigenous land, particularly in Utah. So middle-class socialism. The feudal aristocracy is not the only class that has been ruined by the bourgeoisie, and whose conditions of life starved and perished in modern bourgeois society. The medieval burghers and the peasant proprietors were the precursors of the modern bourgeoisie. In the countries in which industry and commerce are but little developed, this class still vegetates alongside the rising bourgeoisie. In countries where modern civilization is developed, a new middle class has arisen, fluctuating between the proletariat and the bourgeoisie, and ever renewing itself as a supplementary section of bourgeois society. But its individual members are constantly hurled down by competition into the proletariat, and moreover, with the development of modern industry, they see the hour approach when they will completely disappear as an independent section of modern society, and be replaced in commerce, manufacture, and agriculture by overseers and stewards. In countries like France, where the peasants form much more than half the population, it was natural that writers who sided with the proletariat against the bourgeoisie should take, in their criticism of the bourgeois regime, the standard of the little middle class and peasant proprietors, and champion the working class from the standpoint of the petty bourgeoisie. Hey. Thus, middle-class socialism arose. Sismondi was the head of this school, not only in France, but in England also. This socialism analyzed with great acuteness the contradictions inherent in modern conditions of production. It laid bare the hypocritical apologies of the economists. It proved incontrovertibly the disastrous effects of machinery and the division of labor, the concentration of capital and property and land, overproduction, crises, the inevitable ruin of the lower middle class and peasantry, the misery of the proletariat, the anarchy in production, the crying disproportion in the distribution of wealth, the industrial war of extermination between nations, the dissolution of old customs, and the old family relations of the old nationalities. So again, kind of talking about how I was saying like overseers, that it's like a supervisor class of like managers, people who are able to not necessarily be part of this upper class bourgeois capitalist class, but that people who are in middle class socialism still are able to benefit from the work and oppression of the working class, and lower classes. So just in general, and that it is a lot of the time when we see people who are coming from this middle class, they are able to actually have access to politics, and that if we're continuing this thought of Marxist tradition, that many of these people are already part of this class that is compromised, and when they are able to be part of the ruling class in politics, that nothing changes meaningfully because they are benefiting once again, and they don't have an incentive to actually be acting for people who are in the working class, people who are truly proletarians. And how this just goes to show, like, it continues the cycle of like controlled opposition, of people being bought with their interests, and just cycling people in and out of these positions rather than having meaningful uprising and revolution of the lower classes. We can also see how this happens in organizing spaces, even the existence of people who are in charge of nonprofits, them being able to give themselves a much more livable salary than people who are working for hourly wages. Like, this is not always the case, but it can very much be the case of the existence of nonprofits, or people who start nonprofits, people who are able to benefit from them and use them as a vehicle, even for nefarious means, like for laundering money and continuing exploitation, but also, like, on their face having this idea of sanctimoniousness and being for the common good, that they are still upholding this state of inequality, which is why people call it the shadow state nonprofits a lot of the time. I was going to say something else. Oh, as well as in organizing spaces, like, and this is where, like, I have run into some issues in my own personal experience, is trying to tell people that, like, they can't just be making decisions for everyone just because they are part of the middle class. That, like, if they are wanting to be a true ally and actually advocate for proletarians, for everyone, that people must engage within this idea of, like, everyone is viewed as equal, rather than already, like, assuming these areas of leadership and responsibility that are completely unearned, and that people are not chosen to be in leadership positions to speak on behalf of them, even if they even want people to speak on behalf of them. That, like, that is a form of continuing these systems of hierarchy that supposedly are being fought against. And that most of the time it's the people who have the most free time, which means that they are not always having to work, that they have access to capital, that they have access to whiteness and maleness, cisness, heterosexuality, able, whatever it means to be able-bodied in this society. That, like, these examples of privilege mean that, like, you are more likely to be thinking of yourself as a particular leader, or actually having the means to be taking on that role, when it is not in the interest of proletarians or everyone who is supposedly involved with the organizing process. The positive aim, however, of this kind of socialism is to re-establish the old means of production and exchange, and with them the old property relations and the old form of society, or else it aims at cramping the modern means of production and exchange within the framework of the old property relations, which have been shattered by those means as they were bound to be. In either case, it is both reactionary and utopian. Corporate guilds for manufacture, patriarchal relations, and agriculture, that is its last word. In its further development, it succumbed to a miserable fit of melancholia, which, back in the day, that was also another word for, like, depression. Okay, that's all that I have time for today, but we will continue with C, German or True Socialism. True Socialism. Okay, that's the last one. And then we may or may not be able to get into this very last, or not this last one, get into number 2, conservative or bourgeois socialism. So maybe I'm conflating some of these things as well. I probably should read this before reading this out loud to everyone, so I can not just be spewing things. That would be the more responsible thing to do. I'll do that for tomorrow. I'll put in that work. I think we all deserve that. I apologize if I am just adding more confusion to everything. Okay. I'll read ahead so that I can also come with even more references directly to the reading, so that we can continue the learning process. That if there are definitions that I'm not sure of, I'll actually have those, like, prepared and ready to go. But anyway, that's going to be it for me today. Thank you for indulging this process. I'm sure there's so many Marxists and communists that are very upset with me. People who are much more knowledgeable than I am about these things are probably screaming at me, but that's okay. I am wanting to learn and trying to learn, so I just need to do the work beforehand. Anyway, thank you for being here. It was lovely being with you all. Lovely chatting with you. I will be on tomorrow. We will be talking about more labor organizing since we were able to get through more local news today. Finish up some of the things that we didn't get to with talking about Marxism and having more of that decolonizing lens in particular that I want to highlight. And I also do my homework and reading ahead. Anyway, that's going to be it for me, but thank you for being here. It was lovely being with you, chatting with you. I hope you have a good rest of your day, evening, and I will see you soon. Okay, bye.